Do you want to know which running backs you should start or sit in week 4? Stay tuned and we're going to let you know. Welcome back, Endgame community. I'm Pierre, he's Chris. We're going to do like always and go game by game and break down every running back that might matter for fantasy football to tell you who should be in your lineup and who should be on your bench. First of all, let's talk about the running backs. You really don't have to think about, these are must starts no matter what the matchup is. Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Najee Harris, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, Saquon Barkley, Leonard Fournette. All right, let's kick things off with a Thursday night game. It should be a good one. It's got the defending AFC champs, the Cincinnati Bengals at home to face this year's soon to be AFC champs, maybe, the Dolphins. All right, but look, Dolphins riding high, coming off that victory against Buffalo. Going to face the Bengals, who kind of got right against the Jets. Let's start with the running backs. Well, Chase Edmonds scored twice, but that's kind of it. Raheem Mostert's still involved. Man, it's kind of a mess here. So let's start with Chase Edmonds. Are you going to start him based on the fact that he got that red zone work?
No, I'm not. I'm not chasing touchdowns. This is a full-on split. In fact, Raheem Mostert got a little bit more carries than Chase Edmonds. I just cannot trust this backfield. And the Bengals are an underrated run defense, so I'm staying away. No to Chase Edmonds.
Well, I'll say that he's a possible start. You know, he's not an ideal RB2 at this point, not getting as much work, obviously, as we hoped for. But I did like the fact that he was the guy used in the red zone in short yardage. You know, not really a bigger back, but he's getting that. He should at some point start catching passes, I would assume. And in this game, if the Bengals are putting up points, which they can do, I think he can be started. And then Raheem Mostert, I'm guessing you're going to say no to him too.
Yeah, if I'm not starting Chase Edmonds, I'm not starting Raheem Mostert. I'm out on this backfield until we get more clarity at some point.
Yeah, so I'm going to pass on Mostert. Like I said, he might get a few runs between the 20s, but not really a big pass catcher, not going to get too many scores. So without a big play, not valuable enough to start. He's going to be like a bye week only kind of guy. All right, then the next game will be London matchup. First international game of the year. Vikings at the Saints. Both these teams are banged up. Let's start with Dalvin Cook. You know that he, once again, suffered a shoulder injury, and we saw Madison step in. So let's talk about Dalvin Cook. It sounds like he might play. He's just going to strap on a brace and go for it. So do you trust Dalvin Cook in your lineup?
I mean, if he plays, you pretty much have to play him. I don't like the matchup. I could see him. I mean, he hasn't really been great anyways this year. I could see him having a really down week, but I think if Dalvin Cook goes, you have to start him.
Yeah, I mean, look, he was running really well. That's the unfortunate thing. He was having his best game so far this season until that injury, and it's not something serious. It doesn't sound like it'll keep him out, and he's dealt with this before. I don't love him, especially this matchup. The Saints have a good run defense, but yeah, I kind of feel like you probably need to start him unless you're in a shallow league. And then I got to ask about Alexander Mattison. So what if Cook doesn't go, right? Or if they say he's going to be limited, is Mattison worth a shot?
Yeah, I mean, again, don't love the matchup here. The Saints defense is very, very good. But we know if Cook doesn't play, Madison's going to get most or all of the work. So I think if Cook is out, you can feel okay about starting Alexander Mattison.
Yeah, exactly. If Cook does not play at all, then you go with Madison. If Cook is active in any way, don't bother. Sit Madison. And then we got to talk about Alvin Kamara. I mean, look, he's not a must start, obviously, and he's also been banged up. He came back last week, but really didn't do anything great. So how do you feel about him in this matchup?
Yeah, I think he's startable. Vikings run defense, nothing to be scared of. Obviously, you know, Kamara's not going to be a guy who's going to catch a ton of passes like we're used to in the past, but he's getting enough work to be startable as an RB2.
Yeah, I mean, look, I kind of lean him being more towards a RB3, like a flex kind of play. I feel like he's a must start, but it's a good matchup against the Vikings, and he's active. Hopefully he's a little bit better. But man, you know, we're going to talk about him more in detail in a future video. So Browns at the Falcons. Look, Nick Chubb, some might say he's a must start. I don't know if you fit that bill, but Chris, against Atlanta, come on, Nick Chubb, you got to go with him, right?
Yeah, you got to start Nick Chubb in this matchup against the Falcons. Definite must start.
So much touchdown upside. Definitely starting Nick Chubb, especially against the Falcons. What about Kareem Hunt, though? Not usage, not as high as we'd like. How do you feel about him in this matchup?
I like Kareem Hunt in this matchup. It's easy to look at the numbers and think, oh, Kareem Hunt's not getting the work, but he really is. And look, it could have easily been Kareem Hunt who scored a touchdown last week, not Nick Chubb. Against this Falcons defense, I think both these guys have a great chance to score. I think Kareem Hunt is a solid RB2 start this week.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to agree because, look, the Falcons have actually been putting up points. First 3 weeks, despite not having an easy schedule, they might push the Browns, and they might need Hunt to get more involved. So I'm going to say I feel better about Hunt this week. He's a pretty good start. What about CPAT? Showing some life, especially last week, had some big runs. You think Patterson falls in the must-start category?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it didn't really look like Algier was going to split time with him. So, and also, we don't know the status of Myles Garrett after that car crash, which would be a big blow to this defense. So I think you got to roll with CPAT.
Yeah, I agree with there. Look at maybe down the stretch he'll fade again, but right now Patterson's running strong. I feel like he's a solid low-end RB2, so probably going to start him if you have him. All right, Bills going against the Ravens. Devin Singletary did something we did not know he could do, and that's catch a lot of passes. This offense looks a little different. Remember, new offensive coordinator. You think Singletary does it again?
I mean, no, he's not going to catch 9 passes and get 11 targets again, but he's going up against a very bad Ravens run defense. I mean, Stevenson and Damian Harris last week annihilated this defense, and I don't expect anything different. There's always risk that Josh Allen just, throws 4 touchdowns and they don't run the ball, but I think Singletary is a solid start in this matchup.
Yeah, he's never going to have the highest ceiling just because kind of limited usage, but the Ravens just getting gashed on defense. Again, both Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson had solid weeks, so yeah, I think you can start Singletary. I think he's kind of a solid low-end RB2 once again. And then what about James Cook? I know he's not really the guy yet, but he's also kind of being involved, and he's catching some passes. Do you think he gets more involved?
No, I'm not starting James Cook this week. Right now, he's more of a guy I would like to start when the Bills are probably going to be playing from behind, which unfortunately is probably not going to be very often this year, and I don't think it's going to be this week. So I'm not starting James Cook.
Yeah, I do think eventually we could see him become more fantasy relevant, but not yet. Let's pump the brakes. So even against the Ravens, I'll say you don't want to start him yet. And then you got J.K. Dobbins. I mean, he didn't do a lot, but do you think he plays more? Is he going to be on the radar this week?
I'm sure he'll play more. I'm sure they'll increase his snaps, but still not a guy I can trust in my lineup, especially in this matchup. I know the Bills' defense is banged up, but they're still good. Not starting J.K. Dobbins.
Yeah, you guys know that we're not big on Dobbins this year, but just objectively speaking, he's not going to get that many touches, and this is a tough defense to run against, so you can sit Dobbins. All right, the Commanders at the Cowboys, divisional matchup here. Let's talk about Antonio Gibson. Reached the end zone. I mean, he's been serviceable. Do you think he can have one more week of value in fantasy?
I'm not going to say Gibson is a must-sit at this point. I think he's more of a if-you-need-him kind of guy because he can always score a touchdown. So, not a must-sit, not a must-start, just a if-you-need-him.
There you go. I agree with that. I mean, until Robinson actually plays, Gibson will have some value, but he's not going to be your first choice, maybe not your second choice. So, I'll say he's a maybe. And I'm obligated to ask, Zeke Elliott.
I'm not going to say a must-start, but I think this is a week where you can actually feel fairly confident starting Zeke because this Washington defense is really, really bad. So I think Zeke is a fine running back to start.
Yeah, a fine start. Wow, that's even stronger than I expected. No, yeah, I think he can get by with him if you need to. Not a great start, really. I don't think that's going to be the case at all this year, but yeah, I think you can play Zeke. And then what about Tony Pollard?
Same thing. I feel a little bit better about Zeke because we know he has more touchdown upside and he's going to get more of the work. But I think Pollard is a guy that in this matchup, if you need him, you can feel okay starting him.
Yep, he's always going to be kind of that guy that you could flex, as long as both running backs are active. Can't go crazy about either one, but you can flex them if you need to. All right, Seahawks at Lions. It's going to be an interesting one. Okay, let's start with Rashad Penny. He looked good at times last week, but just not getting enough touches. I really thought they would run the ball more, but do you think Penny, maybe against the Lions, has value?
I do. I like Penny a lot this week against this defense. I'm going to say must start.
Yeah, must. Okay, man, you keep surprising me. Look, I'm big on Penny. I really wish that he would see more touches. This could be the game. I really am surprised they haven't used Kenneth Walker at all, more than they have. So yeah, I feel like Penny is a pretty solid start this week as well. And then Ken Walker, probably not, right?
Yeah, even in this great matchup, just not getting the usage he needs yet to be fantasy relevant. So can't start Walker yet.
Yeah, I'm gonna say keep him stashed, right? If you have the space, but yeah, you can't start Walker at this point. All right, now this is a big one because we really don't know. We're hearing DeAndre Swift maybe now has a shoulder injury, but he hasn't been ruled out. And I mean, he could miss no time. He could miss multiple weeks. All right, so bottom line, if DeAndre Swift is active, do you feel compelled to keep him in your lineup?
This is such a tough thing because it's such a good matchup against the Seahawks, right? We know this is just a terrible defense, run and pass. But what we've seen the last 2 weeks with his usage, I don't know if I can risk DeAndre Swift if he plays, only getting 4 or 5 carries, only catching a couple passes. I think even if he plays, unless he practices fully all week, which seems almost impossible at this point, I think I have to sit DeAndre Swift even in this matchup.
Yeah, I just don't do it. I mean, are we really hoping that you'll get more from him than you did last week? Because that's the thing. It's almost worse to have a player try to play through injuries who really can't do it because you have him in your lineup and he's just taking up space and you're getting nothing from him. So, man, if they're already talking about that he should sit out a couple weeks, then he should be on your bench. So, no, I cannot put Swift in my lineup, which is really disappointing. But then does that make Jamal Williams, who scored twice, by the way, last week and had 87 yards on the ground, does that make him a must start?
I just said it. This is a great matchup. Jamal Williams, we know he's going to primarily be the guy, which is more than enough against this defense. So, yeah, I think if Swift is out or even if Swift isn't 100%, you have to start Jamal Williams either way.
And that's what I was going to say. I don't think it matters either way because Swift was active last game. So Williams definitely should be in your lineup, even in PPR leagues. I know it doesn't catch a lot of passes, but it doesn't matter if you keep scoring. All right, Chargers face the Texans. Another guy we really thought would be a no-brain must start. And now I have to ask about Austin Eckler because a lot of people are worried, and they probably should be. Are you as worried?
Yes, and this should be an absolute get-right spot for Austin Eckler against the Texans. But they just lost Rashawn Slater for the entire season. He's an incredible offensive lineman and run blocker. That is a big blow to this offense. And Justin Herbert, we know, not even close to 100%, right? Did not look close to 100% last week. So I don't think you can bench Austin Eckler just because the matchup is so good. But be prepared to maybe be a little disappointed again. So you got to start him, but maybe this doesn't have the upside we'd like him to have in this matchup.
I mean, you'd think he'd be a must start just because he's probably your first round pick. And, do you really have someone who is better than him? But we've heard some guys, ask questions, and people have teams where they do have a third, maybe even the fourth running back, who is better, getting more production. Maybe you picked up James Robinson, whatever. I don't think he's a must start. I think you can start him, and he's getting by with the fact that he's catching 8-9 passes. But, man, I thought last week was his get-right spot against Jacksonville. I really thought it was. He's not being used as much near the goal line. Touchdown regression is severe, right? And I don't feel like you have to if you do have somebody with more upside. And then on the other side, Dameon Pierce, no doubt about his usage. But against the Chargers, how do you think he does?
Great matchup for him. And we saw last week James Robinson, torch this defense on the ground. I talked about it in the boom video. I had James Robinson as a boom. I said this defense is not very good against the run. My only concern with Dameon Pierce is he fumbled in that game and got benched late. If he's not in the doghouse, Dameon Pierce is a must start.
Yeah, I don't think they'll, punish him a whole game. They need him. They'll roll with him. Like you said, Chargers better on pass defense than run defense. I kind of feel like Pierce at this point is a must-start RB2. Bears at Giants, another big question mark here. David Montgomery, will he go? It sounds like he's okay. Coach said he's quote-unquote good. So if he plays, do you play him?
Again, this is going to come down to how does he practice. If he's not really practicing and then barely practices Friday, I'm going to be very nervous that it's going to be more of a split or maybe even more Herbert than Montgomery because he's not 100%. So I'm going to say Montgomery more of an if you need him start this week.
Well, it does obviously depend on the health. I think if there's no limitations, like if he's not a game time decision and they say he's good, I'm rolling with him because you know what? People are now expecting Khalil Herbert's just going to take over or it's going to force a timeshare. I don't think so, right? That hasn't been the case. They already knew what they were getting with Herbert going into the season. Herbert will get some touches, but I think Montgomery is still the guy, and he's definitely the pass catching back because that's something Herbert doesn't do. So I think if Montgomery has no limitations, you start him because this is a good matchup against the Giants. And then Khalil Herbert, obviously we're going to assume if Montgomery does play, that's the question. If Montgomery doesn't play, I think you have to start Herbert, right?
Yeah, if Montgomery is out, Herbert, a must start.
All right, and then what if Monty is active? Is there still some room for Herbert to start?
Very risky because, there's definitely a chance where it's just all Montgomery. So again, I'm going to say if Montgomery plays, Herbert's more of an if you need him.
Jags facing the Eagles, which is a surprisingly competitive game now. Jaguars looking good. So James Robinson, has he entered the must-start conversation?
Yeah, I think at this point, James Robinson is pretty much a must-start.
Yeah, I don't love the matchup on paper, but I love the fact that Robinson is among the leaders in touches as far as all running backs go. So, yeah, I feel like you have to start Robinson. Travis Etienne, maybe not so much. Is there any hope for him in this matchup?
Not really. No. It's going to look like it's going to take James Robinson getting hurt for Etienne to really pay off value. So, no, I can't start Etienne.
Yeah. Even when the Jaguars have been down, which hasn't been that often this year, he's just not getting enough touches. I really think you have to keep him on your bench until further notice. And then a guy, I'll just go ahead and say it. I never will say that Miles Sanders is a must start in this matchup. You know what? I feel the same way. I feel like he's only if you really need him. And look, there's no bye weeks left so you really shouldn't need him. So I'm going to say probably we'll sit Miles Sanders. But you agree?
Yeah, only if you need him kind of guy. Great spot last week and did nothing. So only if you need him.
Jets facing the Steelers. Of course, you're still rolling with Najee until further notice. Let's talk about the Jets duo. Michael Carter, technically still the starter. How do you feel about him?
Not good. We saw a lot more Breece Hall last week than we've seen all year. And worse for Michael Carter, Breece Hall got but most of the targets last week. And this isn't a game where they should be, trailing by 2 or 3 scores because the Steelers offense just isn't that good. So I don't feel very good about Michael Carter at all. I'm sitting him.
Yep. It's going to start happening. We knew it would be coming at some point, and I think this is the time. So Michael Carter, I don't really think you need to start him anymore. Not that the Steelers defense is dominant, without TJ Watt, but it's just not enough excitement there for Carter. And then Breece Hall, look, we kind of told you to draft him, and Chris has been telling you for a couple of weeks to buy low and to get him. But do you feel comfortable starting him right now in week 4?
As an RB2, I think he's a solid RB2 start. Again, they're not going to probably throw as much as they throw in the first 3 weeks because this shouldn't be a game where they're way behind. But it looks like he's starting to take over this backfield, so I think it's a solid RB2.
I agree. You might see more Hall this week, and you know what? He's catching passes. That gives him a floor. I feel like not a must start, but I think he's a solid, kind of more high-end RB3 player for me this week. And then Cardinals, Panthers, one running back you have to start on the other side. James Conner, I don't know, going against the Panthers on the road. He didn't look that great last week. Do you think he does any better this week?
James Conner is what James Conner is. He's got to score a touchdown. And this is not a great matchup. This Panthers defense is good. We saw that last week. But I still think as, an RB2, he's an okay start.
I'm going to go a little lower and say he's more like a flex play if you need him because, like you said, doing nothing great. I'm just really down on this whole Cardinals offense. Not been impressive. Well, defense either. But I just don't see that touchdown upside nearly as high as I did last year. So, I'm definitely down on James Conner. You think this is a better matchup, but it doesn't matter if they just can't move the ball effectively. Patriots, Packers, a bunch of running backs to talk about here. So, let's start with the leader of this committee, and Damian Harris of the Patriots. News that Mac Jones might be out for a while, so does that mean they run the ball more? Do you feel better about Damian Harris or worse?
Maybe slightly better because I do think they'll have to lean on the running game more. But look, they just had a great matchup against Baltimore. Packers aren't an elite run defense, but they're solid. I'm not going to say a must start. I'm going to say an if you need them start.
Yeah, I can't get too excited because I think they'll try to run the ball more. But look, on the road at Lambeau Field with a backup quarterback, not a great offense to begin with. I worry that Damian Harris could get scripted out of this game. It's not going to be the same as running against Baltimore. I guarantee that. So, very iffy. Like, you could start him, but really it would be only in a non-PPR league. And then Ramondre Stevenson, well, he kind of looked better last week. But again, he's not getting Baltimore this week either. So, how do you feel about Ramondre?
Yeah, same thing. I feel like he's an if you need him kind of guy. You can start him. Maybe feel slightly better about him than Damian Harris because he will catch more passes, but it's not like he's a huge pass catching back. So if you need him, you can start him.
Took the words out of my mouth. I feel slightly better about him than Harris, but not great. So kind of just an RB3 at this point or a flex. And then Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon. Start with Aaron Jones, predictably, because we called that last week. Flopped against Tampa after destroying Chicago. How does he do against the Pats?
I'm sure he'll do better than he did against Tampa, but I still have concerns. This is a full 50-50 split. Like the same amount of carries, same amount of targets, same amount of everything's 50-50. So I'm going to put Aaron Jones in the if you need him column. I don't think he's a guy you have to start or force in your lineup. If you need him, he's fine.
Yeah, I do feel a lot better about him because obviously not quite as stout of a run defense, but also I feel like the game script will favor him, and he'll get some more usage. But again, he's not a guy who's getting 20 plus touches a game anymore. He's just not. So I agree. He's kind of a flex play at this point. And then A.J. Dillon, I feel pretty good about him. I hate to say must start, but I definitely feel like he's a good start this week.
Yeah, I mean, I can't go that far just because, again, it's 50-50. And I know Dillon has chances to score, and if they are up, it'll probably be more Dillon getting the carries than Aaron Jones because he's more of the big clock-killing kind of back. But just anybody in a 50-50 timeshare like this is so hard for me to say, you have to start him unless it's a great matchup. And this isn't a terrible matchup, but it's not a great matchup. So, again, I'm going to say if you need him, you can start him.
Broncos at the Raiders. Raiders still looking for their first win. Let's see if it happens at home. But let's talk about the Broncos side. Javonte Williams, who, of course, was vultured with a touchdown at the end. How do you feel he does against the winless Raiders?
I mean, I feel pretty good. This is a great matchup. We just saw Derrick Henry look like vintage Derrick Henry against this team. I think Javonte has a nice week. I'm not going to say must start, but I'm going to say a solid RB2 start.
I'm going all in on Javonte this week. We'll see if it happens, but I'm saying yes, definitely want him in my lineup. And then Melvin Gordon, like I mentioned, he got that work at the very end. Does that mean anything this week?
It means enough in this matchup for me to say if you need him, you can start him. I mean, he looked terrible last week, but he got a touchdown. And against the Raiders, I think he's getting enough work that if you need him as like a flex, he's startable.
Yeah, I don't think I'm still going to start Melvin Gordon because, again, he's just going to be touchdown dependent, and I'm probably going to go with an option that has more upside. So I'll still pass on Melvin Gordon. And then Josh Jacobs did wind up playing week 3, and he owned the backfield. We're really seeing nobody else get touches, but again, he really just didn't do a whole lot for fantasy. Do you think he does any better this week for any reason?
No, this is a tough matchup against this Broncos run defense. I'm not starting Josh Jacobs. There's no upside here.
Yeah, I'm yet to see anything to excite me in any way about Josh Jacobs, so I'm going to pass. Chiefs at the Bucks. Well, let's talk about CEH. Felt good about him last week. He's getting red zone looks, but this is that Tampa Bay defense that really shuts down running games. So can you trust CEH?
No, it's been a fun 3 weeks, and maybe he'll be better going forward. But in this matchup, with the amount of usage he's getting, like 7 carries, 8 carries a game, no, he's going to have to score a touchdown to have any value this week. I'm going to bench CEH.
I'm going to agree. I'm going to sit CEH this week if I can because, like you said, look, it's not like he's getting a ton of volume anyways. So going against a really tough defense, I'm going to pass. And then last game of this slate, we got the Rams at the Niners. My boy Cam Akers did find the end zone, looked good. Not a ton of yardage because not a ton of carries, but just giving you any hope for the future.
I mean, maybe a little hope for the future, but not the future as in week 4. This is a very tough run defense. We saw what they did against the Broncos last night. Totally touchdown dependent. I'm going to say no to Cam Akers.
Yeah, look, even I have to admit, it's not a good matchup on the road against the Niners. He's still not really owning that backfield. They're really just not running the ball a ton. So I'll say you can flex him if you need him. He's looking a little better, but he's definitely not a must start. And then on the other side, you got Jeff Wilson. I mean, he's definitely the only running back they're giving carries to. But going against the Rams, is he startable?
I mean, he's almost startable on volume, but I would really hate to start him in this matchup. I mean, have we seen any running back have success versus the Rams yet? It's almost better to throw against this defense, as crazy as that sounds. So I'm going to say Jeff Wilson, nothing more than an absolute desperation if you need him type of start.
Yep, and that's how I kind of always feel about Jeff Wilson, and this matchup's not going to make me feel much better. So Wilson only if you really have to. All right, now you know how we feel about all the running backs that you should be starting or sitting. But what about wide receivers? You definitely need to know what to do there as well. Check out our playlist for week 4, and we'll give you all the best advice, including our start tip for every position that matters.